in the world. Welcome to my daily Instagram live / YouTube, depending on which platform you're watching this on. We are studying the book of Deuteronomy, and we are on chapter 20 today. So, shall we do a little quick recap of chapter 19? These ads on this Bible app are very annoying, to say the least. Okay. So, chapter 19, we were talking about a little bit of the court system, and it went into detail of the cities of refuge and what that looks like. So it said that the land that was given in possession to the Israelites was to be divided into 3 different parts. Not necessarily, you're supposed to set aside 3 cities in the land to serve as cities of refuge. And that is just default. And then if there was obedience, then you would get more land in order for cities of refuge as well. So this purpose of the city of refuge was basically that if anybody had an accident or a crime that was committed that was not intentional, it was not done with malice, then they were to retreat to the cities of refuge until it was time for them to be heard in front of the courts. So it was basically just a place where they could be in timeout until it was time for their hearing. And then it also talks about the fact that in the court system, there needs to be more than one witness in order for it to be a verdict. So you can't just have one person that says something and they're going to convict you of guilty just off of one person's account. Ideally 2 or 3. Etc., etc. And then we were also introduced to the concept of an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, which was the old time principle in dealing with crimes. So if you were to commit a crime, your punishment would be congruent to what your crime was. So if you stole, cattle from your neighbor, you would have that removed from you as well. Or if somebody killed your son, their son would be killed. It could be normal and it could be intense. So an eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth. Now chapter 20. Chapter 20 is talking about going to war. So if in the event that they were to seek or to be in war, which was foretold that was something that they were going to come across because they were going to inherit more territory from the tribes that were to lose their land. So God is reminding them to have faith in this chapter. And it says, when you go out to battle, this is a verse 1 in chapter 20. When you go out to battle against your enemies and see horses and chariots and people more numerous than you, do not be afraid of them, for the Lord your God who brought you up from the land of Egypt is with you. So that is a quick reminder that God has done this before. God has done exactly what he said he was going to do, and he promised that he was going to take you out of captivity from Egypt, and that was done. You're here right now. So if there was a reason for you not to have faith, we wouldn't be standing here. So it was a quick reminder for them to have faith and to not be afraid, because God has already foretold them what's going to happen, and it's going to happen exactly like that. So this is just basically a faith reminder. And hold on. Actually, this is what I wanted to talk about. So verses 5 through 8, the extended version of the Bible has like notes, and I'm going to read this aloud. So it says, let him depart and return to his house. So in the verses, it talks about if this person is, if this man has a wife and is afraid that his wife is going to, I don't know, not be able to spend time with him or whatever because he's at war, let him go home. So it says that like a couple different ways and a couple different times. So that's all verses 5 through 8. So it says, let him depart and return to his house. 4 exemptions from service in Israel's volunteer army were cited to illustrate the principle that anyone whose heart was not in the fight should not be there. Those who had other matters on their minds or were afraid were allowed to leave the army and return to their homes, since they would be useless in battle and even influence others to lose courage. I feel like this is a revolving theme throughout the book of Deuteronomy, that God didn't want anybody to poison the well. And that is why he was very harsh in saying that when you go to these places that I'm going to deliver to you, all of those people that are residing in the land of Canaan right now, take them out. You're to kill all of them, the children, the adults, etc. Do not leave anybody left over in this land. Why? Because they are already poisoned and they're going to pass it on to you if you allow them to stay. So it may sound harsh, but there was a method to the madness. There was a reason why it had to be that harsh, because God knew that they were going to be easily influenced. And as we keep on reading the book of Deuteronomy, we'll see how that turned out. But the same exact principle goes into with the army or the volunteer army. These people were providing a service, but God only wanted his strongest soldiers. He wanted those that really had the faith to be able to carry out what he needed them to carry out. So the weak could stay home, is what he's saying. And yeah. So then verses 10 through 15, it said, terms of peace. Cities outside of Canaan were not under the judgment of total destruction, so to them Israel was to offer a peace treaty. If the city agreed to become a vassal to Israel, then the people would become tributary subjects. However, if the offer of peace was rejected, Israel was to besiege and take the city, killing the men and taking possession of the rest of the people and animals as spoils of war. Note here the principle that the proclamation of peace preceded judgment. So they had the option, and they could either say yes or no, and obviously yes had a consequence and no had a consequence as well. And then this is verses 16 through 8 say what we just said, not to allow poison of the well. So it said, utterly destroy everything in the Canaanite cities. Nothing was to be spared in order to destroy the influence towards idolatry. And that was the thing that was so abominable to God, that he wanted them completely gone, because they were wicked and that they were worshiping other gods despite God showing himself to them, and them still not being able to understand where all their blessings came from. They were ungrateful, they were stubborn people. So they were to be destroyed. And then that way they wouldn't influence his chosen people, his Israelites, that he is preparing on this journey from turning away from him as they did. And then verses 19 through 20 say, "You shall not destroy its trees. When besieging a city, armies in the ancient world would cut down the trees to build ramps and weapons, as well as facilities for the long siege. However, Israel was not to use fruit trees in the siege of a city so that they could enjoy the fruit of the land God has given to them." So it says, do not cut down the trees that bear fruit. You can use the fruit. But if you are going to cut down a tree, make sure it's a tree that doesn't bear fruit, because that one has not as much purpose. You can use that to make different things. So yeah, that was pretty much it. Okay, so that's verse 20. That's chapter 20. So now I'm going to go ahead and open up the discussion to the comment section. Let's discuss chapter 20. Is there's anything that you guys would like to add to that? Any questions that you may have? Let's discuss together. Okay, George Long says, Deuteronomy 20:14, "But the woman and the little ones and the cattle and all that is in the city, even all the spoil thereof, thou shalt thou take unto thyself, and thou shalt eat the spoil of thine." Okay. Yeah, let me go to it. Oops, I'm sorry. Hold on. That's 14. Okay. So, shoot. Okay, so I think that the important thing about that verse in specific is to also notate which tribe or which people he's talking about. Which women can you take and which little ones can you take and use as use their resources or to use them. And it says that is only the that only goes for the nations that are nearby, not the ones that are to be destroyed, which are the Hittites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. Those you are to utterly destroy, but in the nations nearby, you can use the spoil of your enemies. Yeah, because when I read it at first, I was kind of like, I thought that they said to destroy all of them, but he's talking about just neighbors that are not part of those tribes. Okay, and then Deuteronomy 20:18, that they teach you not to do after all their abominations which they have done unto their gods, so should ye sin against the Lord your God. Exactly. So that is what I was saying, that he didn't want them to spoil the well. He didn't want them to spoil the pure tribe of Israel that were granted this covenant, and they were promised to inherit the land because they were referred to as more of the pure tribe. He trusted, or he didn't trust, that they weren't going to turn away from him, but at that moment they had seen firsthand, or actually their ancestors had seen firsthand, because remember, this is the children of the Israelites, not the original people that were delivered from the captivity in Egypt, but their mothers and fathers were. So they were a lot more closer to being able to see the miracles of God than these other tribes. And these were, well, the other tribes were the ones that did not listen. They, despite any kind of sharing of information and trying to deliver them from what they were doing before, their evil practices and whatnot, they didn't listen. And they didn't want to hear anything about what God was and who God is, because they had their own gods already and they were worshiping them. So he didn't want any of that influence to rub off on the Israelites. Cello says, God didn't want the Israelites to be corrupted by sin in the land the same way he won't let the elected be corrupted by sin in heaven. Absolutely. It makes sense. I feel like this is pretty easy to understand, right? Jay says, thought the commandment on the tree was powerful. It ties to when Jesus commanded the fig tree to wither and die since it didn't produce fruit. Yeah. I remember attending a church that they did preach about the fig tree. And it was interesting, the sermon, because it was saying that these fig trees they did not produce fruit for a certain amount of years, right? And God was getting frustrated with these trees, like there's no purpose for them, right? But Jesus would advocate for these trees, the fig trees that, or was it Jesus? I can't remember who it was. Correct me if I'm wrong. But there was advocation for the fig trees to give them another year and for them to be able to produce fruit. So that was a testament of showing that there was faith in the fig trees. Mind you, this is a parable. So the interpretation is that we are like the fig trees, in which sometimes we need a little bit of advocation because we don't realize our abilities to produce fruit as we can. And we're not living up to our potential. But Jesus sees that we are capable and that he is waiting on us to do what we need to do. But yeah, it's just a parable to show that Jesus is our advocate. But so this tree is, I mean, I could see where you kind of remember the fig tree, the fig tree parable, and you tie it together, because it's like the preparation of saying don't destroy the trees because they have that potential to bear fruit. And if they do bear fruit, then you could utilize them. Exactly. Trees are often symbols of leaders in scripture. Right. Okay. And that is it for the comments that I'm seeing. Thank you guys for tuning in. I know that today was a little bit more difficult to understand than the other chapters. So thanks for bearing with me. I definitely had to refer to the extended Bible for notes of this chapter because it does kind of talk in terms that, not terms that we never heard before, but its interpretation is not literally like obvious, I guess you could say. So I'm glad that I was able to share with you guys the notes from the extended version. I hope that was helpful in trying to understand. But if you have any further questions, or if there's anything that you further wanted to add to it and you don't feel like that was covered, I will be posting this to my YouTube. The YouTube is all caught up, so if you want to catch up on other chapters, feel free to as well. And that is it for today. So I hope that you guys have a great night, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Ciao.